Hey guys, thank you all for coming by today. I'm joined by Mr. Project Wesker here. How you doing today, bud?
How's it going? Doing good, doing good. Very busy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and you have a new studio too, by the way. It looks nice.
Thank you. Yes, yes. I painted it myself. I added my herbs, my umbrella here, some matrix, my avatar. I guess the my profile picture. I also added the Godfather here because I mean, like, why not?
Oh
You
yeah,
know
the
what I mean?
Godfather's peak, man.
Yeah, yeah. I got to add a little bit more stuff, but this is just moved in, last month, so
Yeah.
been doing other stuff. But yeah, but thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So today we're going to be discussing a topic that I have been seeing online pretty much since Silent Hill 2 remake came out. And it's a debate over which game is the best remake, and that would be Silent Hill 2 remake or the Resident Evil 4 remake. Um and there's a really big disclaimer that we both wanted to make clear is whenever it comes to the definition of a remake, we don't it's kind of gray, right? We don't really know for sure because some companies kind of get the names mixed up. Like some companies consider some games a remaster, some consider them a remake, some consider them a reimagining. So just to for the sake of kind of keeping things simple and not going too far off, off topic here, um, pretty much, if you look at Resident Evil 4 remake and Silent Hill 2 remake, they both are on the same caliber whenever it comes to what you'd consider a remake for those two games specifically. So it's easy to compare the two, but again, whenever you get into the actual topic of what is technically a remake, that's where things get a little bit muddy. So, yeah, we're kind of just going to
Yeah,
keep
and
things simple.
yeah. Yeah, and just to add to that, just like for an example as to where things can get very muddy is like, for example, The Last of Us Part One and then Part Two, right? They're calling it a remaster, but then the first one they called it specifically a remake, if
Mm.
I'm not mistaken, or I actually don't fully remember what it was, but I think that's what they said. They were making The Last of Us Part One as a remake, but a lot of people were like, well, they're just reusing a bunch of the stuff, kind of similar to like Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. So yeah, we don't want to get too involved when there's other games like Dead Space that are just like one-to-one remakes. And then you have, Resident Evil, where sometimes they call it Capcom calls it reimaginings, but the community knows it, and we call it remakes. So nobody's has a specific, not everyone agrees upon the terms of remaster, remake,
Mm.
ports, all of that. It seems like it's all just like you said, muddied, right? So I just wanted to add to that. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So I'm glad, yeah, we just established that from the beginning. But yeah,
Exactly. And one thing too, it is the story. I mean, obviously there are story differences because both games have the same idea of what a remake is. At least it seems that at least Capcom and Bloober Team kind of have the same idea on that. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so whenever it comes to story differences, I don't really consider that anything too big for a discussion because I mean, there's going to be differences. Obviously, new lore, like with Resident Evil 4 remake, we have Luis Serra who had a bigger role. Silent Hill 2 remake, we have added in lore as well. Little subtle hints like Eddie with his cold breath, which that's more like a little Easter egg, I guess. But you know what I mean.
I
They
guess
added
like
in little things.
changing the map or the
Yeah,
course of the game. Like for example, like going to the movie theater instead of going to the bowling. What's it called? Pete's
Heath
Bolorama.
Bolorama.
What
Yeah,
is that? What it's called?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. By the way, guys, I should specify. I'm a new Silent Hill fan, so I don't know all of the names. So
Hmm.
I'm very new to this. I'm a new fan. I'm familiar with the series, but after the remake, the Silent Hill 2 remake or the new one, it definitely made me a fan, but a new fan.
Same here actually. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I'm not a veteran whenever it comes to Silent Hill. I played Silent Hill Downpour back on the Xbox 360 and everybody hates that game. So I mean, I may get
Yeah.
dislikes for that, but um but yeah, I mean, story differences I don't really see as that being a big issue. I mean, a lot of people look at Resident Evil 1 remake as a golden standard for a remake, and even that game had added elements like Lisa Trevor and new areas in the map. So to me, those are just added on assets. I mean, again, that's part of it being a remake. So
Or Or another point that pertains to a Resident Evil 1 remake is the lack of they honestly didn't fix any plot holes. They just added more plot holes.
Yeah.
And by that I mean, for example, like at the end of the game, we know canonically, right, that and even canonically is another discussion we could have, but that's a separate video. But going back to what I was saying, canonically, we know that Rebecca and Barry survived the incident, but the game, whether it's the original or it's the remake, and it doesn't add it, like they don't give you that option of saving everybody. It's whether you pick Jill or whether you pick Chris, you know what I mean? You either save Rebecca or Barry. So that right there added more plot holes. The fact too that they added, with Resident Evil 1 and just the timing of Resident Evil 0, like in the OG, it was like the same night. While the new one was a couple of days, if I'm not mistaken.
Something
And
like that.
also
Yeah.
we had like Umbrella Chronicles kind of give us like what was Rebecca doing during that whole mostly the reason they added that kind of timing of making the timing between Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1 even more stretched out was because Capcom was working on Resident Evil 0, right? Even though before
Mhm.
they tried to, but they couldn't. So that was a scrapped idea. But just all that to say is that that Resident Evil 1 is a good example of a remake that didn't fix stuff. I mean, it fixed, like graphics, it fixed other stuff like gameplay, but it didn't fix plot holes. So
Yeah.
that's just something I wanted to add for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And that actually is a good way to kind of lead into the next part about Resident Evil 4 remake. The big plot hole of that game, when I really wish they would have at least included a line to fix this, is why did the United States send one man to go rescue the president's daughter? The remake, they just like the original, they just glossed over it. I guess they have a lot of faith in Leon, so there's things like that to where, yeah,
Technically, they did have another person that people forget. It's Mike the helicopter guy, right? He was on the
yeah,
standby.
yeah, no,
We did help very minimally on the island, but it's funny how yeah, there's just two guys, like just one backup helicopter and Leon, yeah, definitely definitely weird.
if anything,
But
they
I
should
mean,
have had
even
Mike
if we go
drop him
back.
off in the middle of like, the village. Why start him at the very beginning? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Or why did he drive all the way over there with the cops? Right. I guess the
Yeah.
cops were the backup, but they weren't helpful at all, right? So, but
No.
yeah, I mean, I guess another reason that the story was like that was because, Shinji, I think it took him 3 weeks. He stated it took him 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So I've heard either or. But so yeah, there's a lot of problems with the story, but that's another good point, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And both games, they of course they obviously, because again, due to the nature of it being a 20-year difference, really between both games, obviously the gameplay is much more modern, obviously. Resident Evil 4 remake feels a little bit closer to the original just because, well, Resident Evil 4 remake came out. I'm sorry, not remake. The original came out 2005, whereas the original Silent Hill 2 came out what 2001, I think. So there's still a four-year gap difference there to where the Silent Hill 2 remake feels a lot more different than the original, just due to the camera perspective. Whereas with the original four compared to four remake, obviously it's still updated, but the original four kind of set the standard for what would be over the shoulder games in a lot of ways. So that is one thing to kind of note too, is that there are differences there, but it's just a matter of time difference between the original games, really.
No, no, and it's interesting that you said that you mentioned that connection with Resident Evil, right? Resident Evil has always been a type of game that's always kind of pushed the boundaries, right? They've always pushed, they've been at the forefront of innovation with gaming, right? And especially with the first one, right? I mean, it ended up inspiring Konami to be like, hey, we need a Resident Evil, right? That's what
Hmm.
the Shinji and the creative director for Silent Hill, he basically said in an interview that they did for the Silent Hills YouTube channel, Bokeh Game Studio, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, he basically said, yeah, Konami was like, we need to make a Resident Evil, right? So that's it's funny that back in 2001 when Silent Hill, or even before when Silent Hill 1, the original one came out, that the inventory system was very similar, that the director basically mentioned that he just took that. He just ripped it out of
Yeah.
out of Resident Evil. And then it's funny that that's still happening now, right? Because
Mhm.
after Resident Evil 4 came out in 2005, it basically revolutionized so many games to go over the shoulder, right? It was, if not the first one, it was definitely one of the one, the most popular to do that, right? I mean, you got games like, there's so many games that ended up. I mean, just recently, Alone in the Dark remake. We also had Dead Space, right? Dead Space also took heavy inspiration by that, and so it's funny how it's almost like Resident Evil is always inspiring other other games, other horror games to
Yeah.
kind of be like it, right? And it's funny too because Alone in the Dark it was a huge inspiration for one of the inspirations for Resident Evil. So it's funny how everybody just takes, you know what I mean? It's all inspired, right? It's almost like a whole melting pot of creativity. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's just funny. I wanted to say that Silent Hill 2, the combat just was more similar to RA4, right? It's
Yeah.
an interesting observation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's interesting where we're at right now in a point of time because there's a lot of rumors right now, which again, this could be its own video really, but there's a lot of rumors right now that Bloober is already working on another Silent Hill remake, possibly one and
Yes.
three. So
Yes.
it's kind of funny that we're now back to Konami and Capcom kind of having a little battle here with survival horror, like how we were a long time ago. Except this time it's over remakes. And okay, you just mentioned a lot of other horror games like Dead Space, for example. They wanted to jump back onto the remake train thanks to Capcom. So Capcom has
Yeah.
inspired people before, and now they're doing it all over again
Yeah.
with remakes alone.
And it's interesting too because Dead Space and Alone in the Dark, those two examples that I brought, those companies did not do well, right? I mean, EA shut down. What was it? Motive. Motive was the one that did the
Yeah,
the remake, which I haven't
I
played.
think so.
I haven't played the one-to-one remake that they did for Dead Space. I have to. I have it, but I just haven't had the time since I did get a platinum way before when the game came out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that ended up not happening. We're not getting a Dead Space 2, sadly. And then same thing with Alone in the Dark, right? I mean, they put in a lot of money into kind of remaking it, and it just was not successful. So even when it comes to remakes, Capcom has been really good at kind of pushing everybody to do remakes. Well, it's super popular, right? I mean, not the only time where it was kind of iffy, I would say, was obviously with the RA3 kind of debacle, the
Yeah,
RA3 remake. Yeah, where honestly, it had me kind of concerned about Resident Evil 4 when it got leaked from the Capcom data leak in 2020 November, right? I was like, if this actually like if this happens, I don't know if Capcom's gonna ruin, like the
yeah,
same thing that happened with RE3 remake. Was it gonna happen all over again? But after RE4 remake, released, I definitely I'm not worried anymore. I'm not concerned about that happening. Yeah. But
right,
before
right.
definitely. Yeah.
And you know that I mean just even talking about all the remakes in general, I mean, that kind of leads me into the next part about Blooper Team. Blooper Team, man, they nailed it. They did a perfect job of remaking Silent Hill 2. And obviously like I used to have a Capcom, they fell off a little bit with the RE3 remake, but for remake, people are regarding it just as good as again the gold standard of RE1 remake that a lot of people, again, consider that game to be like top tier. Um,
Mm.
but even though, I do love Resident Evil 4 Remake. I mean, yeah, I have a tattoo of it on my arm. I love Resident Evil 4, obviously. Um, but even though I do think it is an amazing remake, an amazing game in itself, um, there are some because I have thought about it, playing that game and Silent Hill 2 Remake side by side and kinda taking notes and thinking about it. Um, that's where you really gotta think, setting, of course, your bias aside, on which one is a better remake. Um, because one thing that Resident Evil 4 Remake left out, granted it's not a lot, but it's still something that they did leave out, was Assignment Ada. Now, granted, not many people like Assignment Ada. I don't. Uh,
I'm one of them.
yeah,
I don't think I honestly to that point, I would say Assignment Ada isn't a huge loss, mostly because it
Yeah,
wasn't canon, right? It wasn't part. It was just like a fun game mode. Like
exactly.
literally Ada's the general story, if I remember correctly, because I've only played it like maybe like 4 times, maybe no, you know what, maybe a little bit more, but I just remember 4 times. Compared to like the actual story where the OG, where I've played like 40 times as a kid,
Yeah,
only as a kid. I don't know how I lost count. But, Assignment 8, I'm pretty sure it was like the story was Ada's supposed to go there before she actually goes on, separate ways mission, and she's supposed to collect a bunch of vials. But where it starts getting a little doesn't really make much sense is when she starts progressing and then she runs into like an infected Krauser from
yeah,
like something that you found in the future. And then just it doesn't make sense, right? It's not a story. It's more like a game mode, kind of like
it
Mercenaries. It's
is.
not meant to be like this is part of the story. This happened really. Now it would have been cool, I will say, if Capcom did kind of do Assignment Ada and did give us a mission pre RE4 of her scouting everything and kind of just collecting data, that would have been interesting and kind of just scrap the idea of the OG Assignment Ada. Because I think, like you said, not a lot of people not a lot, like, it's not like, oh, that's a bummer. I think other stuff, and I made a video about this, I think 2 years ago. Um, yeah, 2 years ago now. So that's when RE4 remake released. Of stuff that I think should have been in the game. Like for example, Ashley's white outfit. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like the PRL. You know what I mean? Like the parasite. One shot. Even though it's
Yeah,
an OP weapon, I think it should have been available, kind of like with the game, where they kind of just give it to you. Though I will say, and this is something that we can get into a little bit later, but one thing that I mentioned in my review for Silent Hill 2 that I did not like was the chainsaw. And one could argue that the
mhm,
PRL was kind of like the OG chainsaw for RE4. And obviously,
yeah,
Silent Hill OG, as when I did the review, Virus did tell me, because I only played the Silent Hill OG like a week before the remake release, that there was a chainsaw in the OG. So that's
yeah,
fun. They kind of gave us the same thing again. But I think that if the PRL for RE4 remake was to have been made, they should have just made it like really expensive, and I'm sure Capcom would have done that because that's what they did with even the OG with the Chicago typewriter, or they switched it to the Chicago sweeper, or the Infinity RPG. So, but yeah, I mean that's just I guess some of the things that I would have liked to have seen, right? Is definitely like just
mhm,
minor stuff like that, like having the OG dress, Ada dress for separate ways. You know what I mean? Like that wasn't involved, even though like in the other games we've had or even like the OG outfit for Leon. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that where I can definitely say like they're missing this. But when it comes to Simon Ada, going back to your initial thing, I don't think it was too too missed by fans. I think
mhm,
that's probably like at the bottom of the bucket, right? The bottom
yeah,
of the barrel. Another thing too, that you're mentioning, right? Because we're looking at differences between Silent Hill and Resident Evil, is combat. Combat. Like I know combat is a very kind of tricky subject when it comes to Silent Hill. Now, mind you, I've only played the first one. I've played Downpour, I believe. I've also played the Shattered Memories, which is like the PSP remake or reimagining of the first one. The combat has never been good for Silent Hill.
mhm,
So that's usually the argument that people bring forth when it comes to Silent Hill 2. But as I stated in my review, I don't think that's enough of a saving grace to kind of omit the fact that Silent Hill 2 remake had several issues with the combat where you'd be hitting an enemy and you'd hit like an invisible wall, right when you're going to get like the final blow to like the nurse's head or whatever. Or sometimes if you're in close quarters combat, sometimes the desk would like kind of protrude out, and again you'd hit like another invisible wall. So that would not be the best, or you really have to nail down the timing of the dodges and stuff. Just yeah, just stuff like that, right? Where I was like, the combat is not that sophisticated.
mhm,
I think that's probably the weakest part of Silent Hill 2, as opposed to RE4 remake, where I think they just overhauled the combat, and I think they overhauled it so much that now when I play the OG, or even when I play RE5 or RE6, I want to parry.
yep,
They
mhm,
added that parry mechanic. I see myself kind of just going like this because there's no parry mechanic in the OG. There are modders, I think, that have made a parry mechanic for the OG,
oh,
which
that's
is I
cool.
haven't tried out yet. Definitely want to do that, but that's when that Capcom again is pushing the innovation there, where they just took an idea. And I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is when the game was being developed, or right when it was going to be released, that people said that the idea of the parry came solely from the Krauser and Leon fight,
Yeah, it did.
and they just
Hmm.
basically expanded that and just decided, you know what, this is such a cool feature, we'll just have that for the rest of the game. So even the way that it came about was so creative, you know what I mean? Like it's such, it's like I said, it's such a great mechanic that when I play the older games, I want to do it. I think it's
Hmm.
almost like something that's just natural, where I want to block, I want to parry, and I want to do a counter attack, you know what I mean?
Well,
So
see, it's funny
that,
you
so for
mention. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Continue.
No, no, I was just gonna say
Oh,
that's why I think that for that specific reason, I think RE4 definitely has the combat. Yeah,
yeah.
it's way better for RE4. Takes the win
Well,
for that. Yep.
I was gonna say it's funny that you mentioned the whole pairing thing because I'm the same way. Whenever I go back and play now, and that's a game I've been playing for 20 years, and now I want to parry. But it's funny you mentioned that because in one of the interviews, I think it was actually in the Game Informer issue, and I have it somewhere. I'll need to check it out. Um, one of the producers was saying the same thing. He said that whenever they added it in, he went back and played the original, and then he started to want to parry, and that's whenever they
That's right.
realized it was a really, really good innovation to the game.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's I forgot about that. That's right.
yeah, and I remember reading that, and I'm like, "Well, I don't think it's gonna be that crazy." Then after playing it, I'm like, "Okay, I see what he's talking about now." Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but now it's also funny that you mentioned the whole Silent Hill 2 things. I remember seeing a video that you and Virus the Virus did together. Now you played on PC, don't you?
I played on both. I played
On
PS5
both?
and PC. Yep.
See,
Yep.
I don't know if maybe I've just not been paying much attention to it or not, but, like, because I play on PS5, and the combat that I've had, I've never had the issues you mentioned, the little invisible wall
Mm.
thing or anything like that. I've never had an issue, but, I mean, maybe I'm just not paying much attention to it. I don't know.
But you did see it though. I did give examples in the
Oh,
review, and
yeah. Oh,
also
yeah, yeah, I did see it.
in my tips video. I did give
Mhm.
clear examples as to when the game was just being weird. You know what I mean? Like I was
Yeah.
just, there's one, I think, footage where I was in the rain, like kind of in the dark, going through Silent Hill, and there's like a nurse there, and I got her to her knees. I shot her to her knees, and then I was gonna hit her, and something was literally preventing me. Like I couldn't hit. And I'm like,
Yeah.
come on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Come on. Like that's not me. That's not a skill issue. That's literally the game preventing me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, but yeah,
Yeah.
no, I played on PC and PS5. I did play it recently, and I think the problem is still there. Um, Maybe I've become a little bit numb to it, but yeah, it's to my knowledge, it's still there on both. And it's, yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. It didn't release for Xbox, right? Like that's the
Um,
only systems is PC and
I think so.
PS5. I'm not mistaken.
I could
Yeah.
be wrong, but I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah, and the whole thing about Simon Ada is that's what I'm saying. Like if I'm being honest, I mean I don't care if Simon Ada's gone. Simon Ada, I highly doubt there was anybody that was like, oh no, Simon Ada's gone. It's a horrible game now. um, but again, though, if setting the bias part aside, it's technically still something that was cut. Same thing with like how you mentioned the PRL. The Ashley Popstar outfit, I was upset it was gone, but which I mean that they could have maybe have done something different with it, but I feel like the reason why that was cut was because of just a different time we live in now. They don't want to offend anybody. Same thing with Ada's OG dress. They changed it some because I haven't looked at that dress in a while, but I do know if I remember right at least it doesn't show as much leg as the original did. So I imagine that's another reason why they had to kind of change it some again, just because different times.
Yeah, they
Um,
they gave her a chi pao. I don't know how to pronounce it. The lunar New Year dress, didn't it? Right. That's
I
her.
think
That's
yeah,
her
something like
new
that.
outfit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty close to the original, but it's not as revealing. Um, and
Yeah. It's more
it's
like
like
her RE6 outfit.
kinda, yeah. And it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
with Maria,
Or
you
mercenaries.
know yeah, exactly. But like Maria in Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 2, my bad, Silent Hill 2 remake. In the Maria, they had to drastically change her outfit because again, we live in a different time now, and I'm sure they want to be careful. Now it's cool they had a little Easter egg to her original dress, or
Yes.
outfit rather. Um, but it's things like that to where it's also kind of hard to judge with some things because it's just a different time now to where it's like some companies are forced to do things essentially. Uh, just like the whole
Yeah.
ballistics line, iconic line, but
Yeah.
but
I miss
they,
that. I miss the
yeah,
ballistics too.
yeah, exactly. Which is funny because I don't know how many people realize this, but in Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake, there in Keno's gun shop, there is something called ballistics ammunition in there. I don't know how many people realize that, but yes, that is in there. So maybe that was kind of like their little way to slip it in before we got 4 remake. Um, you know, but that is one thing that is challenging too about remakes in general. Is there's some things that
Yeah.
just don't fly now. Whether it be lines
Or
or
the women
outdresses.
the women line that Leon says after Ada
Yeah,
drops him off in the island and shoots her hook shot, and then Leon's like women,
yeah,
which
yeah.
he's done several times. RE6, no, RE6 was Jake. RE Damnation, the CGI movie. But yeah,
Hmm.
that's like that's pretty iconic for the character, and they just switched it, right? I don't remember the alternative. What is I don't remember what he said in between
Uh
because that one was such an iconic line. But
yeah, I don't think he said anything that time, in the remake. I think he just kinda looked at her and just kinda shook his head, I think. It's been a minute.
he said something, but yeah, it was completely different. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it was.
yeah,
Um, but, there is one thing too, it's like if you look at weapons, from RE4, again, you're talking about the PRL, for example, and, if you look at the remake, they added in a lot of new weapons, which was great. But they also did, it's weird because they didn't technically take it away, they just changed it a lot, and that was the mine thrower. Instead we got the bolt
yeah.
thrower this time. Um, and if you utilize it right, it can work well. But it's just not the same as the original. It's a weapon to where it's almost an entirely new weapon. It's just that they try to keep a little bit of the spirit of the original mine thrower. So something like that's also kind of hard because, in that case, do you dock points or do you just kind of keep it the same? Because it's a very different weapon, but if you use it
I would
right, it can
dock.
utilize the same purpose.
Yeah, I never use the bolt thrower, and in the OG, I use the mine thrower all the time. So
Same,
for that, I
same.
would. And you know what? Kind of speaking on that, Silent Hill also had a similar problem as well. So, if we're looking at Silent Hill 2, they like, for example, they took away the long pipe, didn't they? Like the one that you kind of stab with, and also they took away the sword. You know what I mean? Like they
Mhm,
just gave you the option to use this, like to drag it a little bit, but you
mhm,
couldn't take it anywheres. And I know obviously it's not realistic, but it's not 100% realistic. It's not like Last of Us where you kind of see the character put the thing on his backpack and then continue on.
mhm.
That's not really what's happening, right? He's always just pulling out stuff from his.
Yeah,
It's kind of like with RE4. He has a briefcase that we never see. We never see
yeah,
Leon running with that briefcase. So I guess for both games missing weapons, I would kind of equally dock
mhm.
both of them. But I
And you're
think it's the
also
same, right?
there's also that spray in Silent Hill 2 in the original. There was a spray you could
Yeah,
get, that they took away. The
yeah.
only unlockable weapon in the entire remake is a chainsaw. And like how you said, they even took away and this they didn't really take away, but, whenever you are playing as James right before I think it's right before you get to the bowling alley, I think, or the theater rather. Um, you get rid of the wooden plank to swap it out for the metal pipe. In the original game, if I'm remembering correctly, you get to have both throughout the entire game. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so I
yeah.
mean, they didn't take it away per se, but they did take away your ability to use it the entire game. Which, granted, who's going to want to use it after you got the pipe anyways? But I'm just saying that technically, if you're going
Yeah.
by a non-bias, okay, yeah, they took this away. I guess it's a half point, if you will,
Well,
because
I would say, and thank you for the correction because yes, that is what happened. They basically
Mhm,
gave it to you, but they just replaced it. It does the same thing. I don't know if it does this. It sounds like it does the same amount of damage, but in the OG, the pipe let you kind of do a different style of attack, right? You could overhand swing.
yeah,
You could kind of stab, right? Like kind of stab the person. While just the normal one, you just kind of just hit side to side.
yeah,
So with the remake, his hitting was the same. It didn't change. Um,
Mhm.
Another thing too I have to mention as well is if we're looking at both games and kind of comparing them, I will say because we were kind of mentioning this before with the PC, right? PC and PS5. I will say the PC optimization is completely it's not great. It's not great. People that have had like top of the line GPUs have had stuttering issues. They've actually had to install mods to kind of fix the whole kind of just to optimize the game to kind of use their GPU at the the best level, right? Or just better than what the base game vanilla game gives you. Because even when I was playing, I'm like, this is like, I think if I have it uncapped at 60 or something like that. No, I think for my GPU, if I had it any like if I had to play at 30 because if I played at 60, things would start stuttering. And I
Yeah.
have a pretty good like it's not like a new GPU, right? But people that have new GPUs like 4000s, you know, 50 series, you know what I mean? Like the new ones, they've had issues with the PC optimization for Silent Hill, as opposed to RE4 Remake, where everything runs really smoothly. I'm not the biggest PC gamer, but I have heard that Resident Evil or Capcom, when it comes to Resident Evil, has done a particularly really good job of optimizing their games for
Mhm.
PC, not just for console. So while Silent Hill, that's completely opposite. I think it runs way better on the PlayStation 5 than it does on PC. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can't push the height and use all of like your systems like GPU, CPU, and stuff. So yeah,
That's interesting
just
because
GPU if we're
yeah,
talking.
because I'm only a PS5 player, so that's interesting to know that. I didn't yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah,
But, one thing too, if you look at now this is something, just talking about game modes, because again, we brought up earlier, Assignment Ada. One thing missing from Silent Hill 2 Remake is, which it's kinda hard to judge it right now because the game is still, pretty young, but that's, Born from a Wish, Maria's DLC.
yeah,
So, if they exclude that, man, that's gonna be a really, really big point. It's gonna be a really, really big hit for Silent Hill 2 remake. Um, because, that is a whole other story that adds a lot to the game. It's not just a little side story. It adds a lot, you know. I would argue it adds even a little bit more than, let's say, a Simon Ada does in the original game in some ways, because this literally shows you um the creation of a character. It shows you, her importance before she meets James. Um, but again, it's kind of hard to say right now because they could be making a DLC. We just don't know yet because the game came out what in October. So let's see, that is what 5 months old, almost 6 months old, something like that.
yeah. Yeah, and Separate Ways took like a year for it to release. But I guess my counter argument to your counter, you were saying how that Simon Ada is that Born from a Wish sub story, or I guess DLC. We'll say it's DLC. This is before DLCs, but DLC.
Mm.
That it was it's superior because it actually is part of the story. Well, for that, I think that the comparison isn't correct because Assignment Ada is like just like a non-canonical piece. It's just a mini game. It's
Oh
almost
yeah,
like
for sure.
comparing Born from a Wish to the Mercenaries. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
can't. I would say a better comparison would be Separate Ways and Born from a Wish, right?
Oh,
And
that's what I
if we're
meant to
looking at
say.
from
If I
that
said
angle,
Simon Ada, my
oh, I
bad.
see.
Yeah, I meant to say that, but
Yeah.
continue. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, okay. I see. Yeah, no, I was just
Yeah.
gonna say 'cause I'm like, yeah, that's a different. You know what I mean? Like it's not comparable.
Oh
But
no, definitely not.
even when it comes to that, which one do you prefer? Like even I guess just from the OG Separate Ways and the OG of Born from Wish. I think it's a bit unfair, honestly. But yeah, what would you say?
Well, it's hard to say because, like how you say that, they're very different animals, so it's kind of hard to compare,
Yeah.
those two directly. But
And I guess the importance to the story. I
yeah, the
guess I should
importance
I
of the
should specify.
story.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, they both. I mean, at the end of the day, you could live without both of them, and the story still be just fine. Um, but I guess the reason why I think Born from a like, if I had to pick, okay, would you rather have Born from a Wish or Separate Ways? Um, Of course, I would still probably go separate ways because I love Resident Evil. But if I was to set my bias aside and think about it logically, um, I don't know. This where it gets kind of hard because Born from a Wish, that's where you literally see, if I remember right, at least the conception of Maria. If you've played the other Resident Evil games, you already know who Ada is, and just by playing the game, she's there to take the Plaga sample. Obviously, separate ways. We see some skirmishes that come up along the way. We get more detail into it. We see a lot of Wesker, which is cool. Um, but I feel like that Born from a Wish, um, you get to see a lot more of Maria and exactly who and really what she is. And I guess one thing too is if you look at Resident Evil 4, again, the original and the remake, really, there's so much content there compared to just Silent Hill. So it's kind of like, if
Yeah.
you strip away Far From a Wish from Silent Hill 2 remake, you've left out a lot compared to, let's say, if they did leave out, let's say, separate ways from the RE4 remake, which would suck. But thankfully that they didn't do that. But if they did, we would still have a super long game. We would still have mercenaries. We would have a lot of content to play with. And that's another thing too, is replayability and content. Because with Resident Evil 4 in the original and remake both, it's very, very replayable. You can go through
Yeah.
and unlock the weapons. You can then spend playthroughs trying to upgrade all the weapons. Um, Silent Hill 2 in the original and the remake, there's not really a whole lot to make you want to replay it. Um, and I feel like Born from a Wish gives you more content. So them not having it, and I hope they do add it. But if they never do, that's gonna dock a lot of points from me personally.
And why? I'm curious to know why because I'm in the think, and I just want to state I'm actually in the. For me, I just recently played A Born from a Wish, and I have to say I think it can definitely do without. That's my
Mm-hmm.
personal kind of after playing it, I'm like, this is not very necessary to the story. And I would also
Mm-hmm.
argue that it actually makes you wonder. It actually opens up. It gives you more unanswered questions. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious to know. Before I get to that, I'm very curious to
Mm-hmm.
know why do you look at Born from a Wish so highly when it comes to Silent Hill? Because I also had a viewer comment on my live stream of it, and I'm going to read it after, but I
Mm-hmm.
want to know your thoughts
Okay.
first.
Well, like I said, I think that the biggest thing is just lack of content. So maybe I'm just content hungry whenever it comes to the game. Um, and I feel like that, and like how you said, the original Born from a Wish, it's not like that it added a crap ton of more content. Like you said, it doesn't do a whole lot for the overall story. You can do without it. Um, and technically, Separate Ways adds a little bit more context to the story because, again, we get to see Wesker. We get to see exactly why
Yep.
Ada was sent. So it's more detailed for sure. But I feel like with the remake, they could do a lot with the Born from a Wish
Yeah.
DLC because they've added so
The
much
potential.
exactly the potential. And again, I think that at the end of the day, I would forgive the Silent Hill 2 remake from pretty much excluding the ability to have the great knife, taking away the spray cans, for example. I would be able to forgive them more for that if we had a little bit more content to play with and a little bit more replayability. Um, which even with Born from a Wish DLC, I don't see them adding in, oh, play it 3 times and you'll unlock this or whatever. They could, but I don't see them doing it like Resident Evil to where, those games reward you for beating it on S plus professional, for example. I've never
Yeah.
even played Silent Hill 2 in the hardest difficulty because there's no point. I don't get a trophy. I don't get any special weapons, so why? Unless I'm just bored and I
Yeah,
really
that's
want to
a
be
good.
challenged.
That's a very good point that I brought up on my review is that the and this is not just for Silent Hill. This is for so many new games that are releasing. I always play on the hardest difficulty. Like for example, as mentioned before, I just played Silent Hill 2, like the OG, a week before the new one released. I streamed
Hmm.
it live. We played on the hardest difficulty for puzzles and also for just normal combat, right?
Hmm.
And I will say I didn't know this, but people were telling me, "What? Are you crazy? You're not supposed to do that."
I,
Like
I was one of them.
people don't do
Remember,
that.
I was one of 'em. I'm like, man, are you
Yeah,
sure you want to
yeah,
do this?
yeah. And those were crazy streams.
Yeah,
Like
they were.
the ending was so crazy. I want to turn them into videos because like into a big video because it was so crazy. I had such a blast playing it, and
Yep.
chat was involved. Chat gave me some strat at the end that just we clutched it, and it
Mhm.
was crazy. We got the best ending, right? I mean, personally, right? I mean, just that's opinion based, but
Yeah.
yeah, but I guess, but that's something that I think Resident Evil 4 did a fantastic job with is that they did give you trophies, if I'm not mistaken, for beating it hard. If
Mhm.
not for hard, if because I got it in 3 weeks, so it's kind of a blur for me of what trophies I got. But I do remember specifically that the game does reward you for beating it on the hardest difficulty. Like you got the Chicago Sweeper, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken, right? Like you get access to that, or you get
Yep.
access to one of the top tier weapons. So it kind of incentivizes replayability while Silent Hill does not. Like for me, playing it on the hardest difficulty, like I just played the game slower than anybody else that got the game during the same time that I got it. You know what I mean? Like I didn't gain
Mhm.
anything from that. Everybody got the chainsaw, whether you beat it on hard, normal, easy, which I find to be a huge problem. I honestly I did not like that. I think it would have been better if we got the chainsaw for beating it on hard again because it
I agree.
incentivizes replayability. Why? Because like you said, what's the point of playing on hard? Why do I ever need to play on hard? Unless I'm doing like a stream challenge or something, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, or unless you just like to play on hard. But yeah, the game did not give me like a special jacket that gives me better things, or it didn't give me like, oh,
Mhm.
like, you get an infinity ammo, or it didn't give me like, I'm just shooting out examples here, but these are, especially when it comes to survival horror, these are reasons as to why you kind of go back to the game to kind of get everything, right?
Exactly.
It's not just with Resident Evil, it's with other, like even Dead Space, right? It gives you other incentives to kind of go back to the game. And I think Capcom's been crushing it with replayability. Like even if you go to RE3 Remake, which is probably the weakest remake, the replayability in that game is amazing. You know what I
It's
mean?
a
Like you
fun
say what you
game.
will about the game. Yeah, it's a really fun game, but the remake, it's not a good remake, which I've been saying for the longest time, and I
Mhm.
know you agree, right?
Oh yeah.
It's not a good remake, but the replayability in that game is far superior
Mhm.
than Silent Hill 2. Because for me, I actually haven't even wanted to replay it, Silent Hill 2, in the longest time because
Yeah.
I haven't. Like I beat it twice or 3 times. I'm about to beat it 3 times, but I stopped, and that's just because I was streaming it. But to go back to the game to play it, and you could also make the argument that the story is a very it's not it's a very heavy story, you know what I mean? it's
Yeah.
not
Oh, it
it's
is.
not something, it's almost like a certain movies where you can rewatch them a long time, but yeah, but no, Silent Hill is maybe one once in like a long time, you know what I mean? But uh, going back to what I was saying before with the comment, because what we were discussing was is that
Oh
what
yeah.
makes Born from a Wish so good, right? And
Mhm.
for me, kind of to before I read this comment out because I thought this was a good point, but for me, I thought it just opened up way too many questions. So for starters, going through all of Silent Hill, like the beginning part of the game until you reach the house, I forgot the name of the house.
Mm.
Um, it kind of felt like it was just kind of dragging on a bit. And then once you get there, I mean, there's the sub story is very easy. It's only about like an hour long, so it's not a very long sub story.
Yeah.
It's very short. Yeah, it's very quick, and you can also beat it quicker if you know what you're doing. But if it's your first time, it roughly took me like an hour. But as soon as you get to the house, you end up talking to this guy that you don't see. Spoiler alert. I mean, the game came out a long time ago, so I'm just going to spoil it. This guy turns out to be like one of like the cults of Silent Hill's like gods or whatever. And
Mhm.
it kind of alludes that, while you're playing the main story of the game, for me personally, I understood it that Maria was just a made up thing. She wasn't a person. It wasn't a thing. It was more like it was just a punishment, like a demon, let's say,
Right.
for James, like almost like a thing to fight James. That's why the Maria kept trying to be seductive. It kept trying to mess with him, right, with her dying and then coming back and then switching her tone and just kind of trying to seduce him and then being like, well, if you pick a certain ending, she gets upset and then you fight her, right? So that's, yeah, and I should note I haven't beaten all of the endings, so correct me if I'm wrong there, but I did the leave ending for the OG. But anyways, going back to what I was saying, that problem of of her not being a real person, and then having a sub story that kind of makes it as if she is, as if she was a person in Silent Hill that looked exactly like Mary. I think is kind of, I don't think that that's what the DLC was kind of proposing. I think that there's a more to kind of suggest that Silent Hill made this thing, right? That this is like a demon in Silent Hill, like kind of like Pyramid Head, whatever you want to call it, a spirit, something that's there
Mm.
to torment James. But I will say one of my commenters actually added that that this actually showcased Mary almost like in a human way. But and I do have a counter to this, but yeah, one of my viewers actually Stitch fan 08, he says, "I love this DLC and it makes me feel so sorry for Maria because she's being punished for what James did, and she's not just a person who was made by the town to hurt James. This DLC shows she does have her own thoughts and feelings. And that's why, because of Maria's story, I have a soft spot for Maria's ending, and I hope Bluebird Team does the DLC and the remake as well. Plus that ending song is incredible." So kind of that point, which I think is a great point, it's a great counter of basically, because in the stream I did say like I don't think this was very necessary. My
Mm.
counter to that counter would be that he specifically said, my viewer said that she's not just a person who was made by the town, but she does have her own thoughts and feelings. Now, this I would say that this is a great counter if we're looking at pregame, right? Like I would say that Maria from A Born from a Wish, which is a prequel to Silent Hill 2, is a very different person. When it comes to Silent Hill 2, and it almost seems like she has an objective. She's there to seduce James, and you can see it right when you meet her at the pier.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like she goes up and touches him, and it looks like she's playing with the idea, like, oh, do I look like somebody you know? You know what I mean? Like that whole conversation, it almost seems like that's she knows what she's doing,
Yeah.
as opposed
Exactly.
to the Maria that we see in Born from a Wish, who looks innocent and looks like I don't know what I'm doing here. I better get out. So there's the disconnect. It's almost like the characters are completely flipped because the Maria in the OG doesn't really have that kind of compassion. We don't see that side of her. If anything, she just gets upset when James kind of insults her and doesn't really care about her. Be like, "Oh, I thought you were married. Oh, get out of here!" And then she's like, "What?" Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then she kind of gets upset. And the reason she gets upset is because at the end we realize that she was trying to mess with him. She was basically like a pyramid head, right? She was Pyramid Head was like, James's guilt is what a lot of fans theorize, which is a great theory. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
Yes. Hmm.
Maria was there for a different thing. Her purpose there was to look like Mary and to basically torment James, to be like, you killed Mary. You know what I mean? But live with me, live with the better version of Mary, which is very kind of demonic. I guess I would say like that's very similar to what
Mm.
like demons would kind of do, right? But Maria in the Born from a Wish is a completely different character. It's almost like the developer was like, oh well, let's have her be, like just like show up in Silent Hill as if she's just like a lady like I don't know, something else, a lady named like Stephanie, and Stephanie just puts on the face, and then that looks very similar to Mary. Let's call her Maria, and then she goes through the whole thing, which is not the case. We know that that's not the case. So that's where
Yeah.
there's a counter, there's contradiction. There's a
Hmm.
contradiction. Now, when I was streaming the game, I heard that the reason they made Born from a Wish was because Xbox wanted to have an exclusive and kind of
Oh,
have the
okay.
game have the DLC very similar to PS2 RE4
Yeah.
with separate ways, and GameCube did not have access to that. Obviously, this is before DLC, where you could just download the sub story. You actually had to buy another game on another system to
Yep.
play the full thing. So I think maybe that's why this was more of a money thing, because the stories just don't add up. It's just very contradictory. It makes absolutely no sense. I actually think that this goes back to my counter argument. I actually think that Born from a Wish actually kind of hurts the overall story, because it's such a different departure, and actually just makes you question the story even more, because then it's
Yeah.
like, well, what is Maria an actual person, or is she like Pyramid Head? You know what I mean? What is she? You know what I mean? Like I still don't know. The Born from a Wish just makes me more confused and makes me think like, oh, Maria was an actual person that lived on Earth, and then she went to Silent Hill. But we
Right.
don't know what brought. But even there, there's no questions. There's no answers to those questions, because we don't know if Maria was an actual person. If anything, we have more evidence to suggest that she was just like even like the commenter, the viewer said, Um, she's just being punished for what James did, and she's not just who was made by the town to hurt James. Like that is what she was. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah,
So
for sure.
it
Yeah.
just felt it just felt like a contract. And sorry for talking so much on that. I just wanted
No, no,
to
no.
mention that. Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
and I actually have a theory about that myself, and this is something I kinda even whenever I played the original game, last year even, I kinda realized that, there are times, especially, early in the story, like, whenever you first meet Maria, like how you said, it's like instantly, like, she knows what she's doing. She obviously knows
yeah,
firsthand that she looks like Mary, she sounds like Mary, just like how an actual demonic, entity would do, right?
yeah,
But then
yeah.
there are some
She has a
very
mission.
human. Right. But then there are some very human moments, like whenever, she's scared in the hospital, she's yelling at James, like, "Oh, anyway, I was scared," this, that, and the other, and, and in the remake.
Anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And in the remake, there was a little Easter egg to that house because she feels actual fear, and James is like, "Hey, what's up?" And she's like, "I don't know, there's just something about this place." And,
Yeah,
I don't know if you ever realized this,
yeah.
but in the original Silent Hill 2, if I remember correctly, in the bathroom, you actually see, posters for Heaven's Night, and Maria is on the poster. So,
Yeah.
I've always kinda wondered, and this is just maybe just headcanon for myself, because again, I'm no Silent Hill expert here, um, but to me, I mean, it's obvious that she is indeed conjured up by the town. There's no question about that. She is indeed,
Yeah.
a manifestation made from Silent Hill. Like how you said,
Yeah.
she's basically a demonic entity, really, in
Yeah.
simple
Yeah.
terms. But I kinda
Yeah.
always wondered if maybe, um, she had
It was real.
some sort of, like, maybe there was a person that lived there, and maybe the town kinda mixed one person with her together to make a being? What I'm saying by that is that, there are some
Mm,
suggestions that, she was a stripper. Well, obviously, she wasn't a
yeah.
stripper because she was just
Yeah.
created. So
Yep.
and, she says in the remake, "Oh."
Contradiction. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the remake, she's like, "Hey, I know a place here in town that young couples used to go to," suggesting which, of course, you could always say, "Oh, this demonic entity is just lying." Or manipulating James. But there are times, like, where she seems like she has a genuine sense of identity, not a goal, basically. And that's why I've always kind of wondered, what if the town pretty much used the vessel of a person and kind of molded them to be this demonic Maria that we know? Um,
And
if
that
that
would
makes any
make sense.
sense.
That's a really good theory actually. And I don't know if this is a theory that's well known in the science because like I said, I'm new to the to
Same.
Silent Hill, but I do know that the first one was very heavy into the occult, right? I mean
Hmm.
that's what kind of they were kind of alluding to in Born from a Wish. They kind of mentioned that, the guy that she was speaking to was one of the gods or whatever, the one of the the things that the idol that one of these cult people in Silent Hill were kind of praying to, right?
Yeah.
Um, and he was just pretending to be the father of the owner of the house, that manor or whatever. I don't remember
Right.
the specific name, but yes, but that's a very good theory that would explain a lot of things that if they actually did just grab like before like the example that I brought up like Stephanie. Let's say Stephanie was a stripper at Heaven's Night, and then they just basically took Stephanie and then shoved a demonic thing into her, and then basically put her into into Silent Hill just to oppress more of the people that go to Silent Hill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That is a possibility. That I see where you're going that, and that would fix a lot of the contradictions. But yeah, I guess yeah, that's something I never thought of. But yeah, that could definitely work. Yeah.
Mhm. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's kind of foggy whenever, I mean, no pun intended, whenever it comes to Maria, and that Born from a Witch DLC. Um, but one last thing too to really think about is, and this is kind of like my final verdict with it. Really, is now. Of course, I am biased. Again, I'm a diehard Resident Evil fan. I'm a brand new Silent Hill fan, and I would love to be just as much into that game and that series itself at some point, and ever actually get to play more of them. But I still do like Resident Evil 4 Remake more. A lot of the reasons is points we've already talked about. Again, the replayability. To me, it's just a more fun game. I think it's more vibrant and it has just a lot more going on in it. But I do think that Silent Hill 2, and this goes for the originals also, is a better horror game because it's terrifying. And I've said this a lot, and it varies from people to people, but I've dealt with a lot of mental health issues, and there's a lot of things in that game that honestly made me stop playing for a little bit because I was like, man, like the music, some of the themes, like encapsulates like how mental illness really is for some people, depression and things like that. But
Yeah.
even setting that aside, if I was to sit here and write on a billboard tally marks of things that are taken off from each game, again, it's very, very hard to pick, but if I'm going by the golden standard of Resident Evil 1 remake to where it's basically the original game just with new things added, obviously there are differences. Nothing's perfect, of course. Um, I still think Silent Hill 2 would technically be a better remake, not necessarily a better game, but maybe a better remake because even the landscape, which granted I've not played the original Silent Hill 2 that much at all. I've only played it like once or twice. Um, but I can't remember of anything that really took out even with the landscape of the game. Like in 4 remake, which granted, again, I'm totally okay they cut this because even as a kid, I thought this was really stupid, was the lava room. The lava room in the original game, um, didn't make any sense, but it's still technically something that was cut. The U3 fight, while yes, it wasn't cut technically because they added it in separate ways, the boss fight was way different. Yes, it's more realistic to be like in a cave or whatever compared to these strange dangling cages or whatever. But that's what made the original so scary because, U3 was like, he had this weird kind of predator like growl hiding from you, and then he would sneak attack you, and then you had to run away from him and jump out those 3 containers. He was a lot more menacing, I felt, in the original, and in this one, they just kinda confined it, you to 2 little areas, and that was it. Um
The Gravedigger esque. You know what I mean? Like the
Exactly.
fight you were mentioning about, yeah, we were talking about that before, but yeah, no, definitely that's it did make him less menacing. I think that's a very good point because in the OG as a kid playing that, I was like, whoa, this thing is ugly, huge, and fast. And
Yeah.
everything's falling apart, and I gotta get out of here. Like there's so many things that the game throws at you. Well, in separate ways, when they added I do like the Hope Santa aspect of it. That was an interesting addition. But yeah, the whole menace, the menacing aspect of it was just it was kind of thrown out the window.
Yeah.
There wasn't that kind of urgency of fighting. He was just kind of finding him in a room instead of floating cage area that transitions to like a dirt area. You know what I mean? It's just like a big worm hole and then just the dirt area as well. But yeah, yeah, no,
Mhm.
definitely. There was one thing that you mentioned too was that was actually a really good point was you mentioned how Silent Hill 2 doesn't have this like it doesn't have places that they took out with the remake as opposed to RE4, right? You were just
Right.
mentioning that. But as you said that, I was actually it made me think and I was like there was one section that they did take out and that was in the prison, the Toluca prison.
Mhm.
That section in the OG, there was actually a hallway where my first playthrough, a lot of my viewers were actually telling me like, "Yo, that's actually kind of like foreshadowing what happens in the room in Silent Hill 4." So there was actually like a thing or something that would be walking around in a prison. They took that section out of Silent Hill 2 remake. But that's just one example where I was actually just thinking. And I don't know if that's from the room. I mean, I guess that this is just secondhand info. Correct me if I'm wrong because like I said, I'm just a brand new Silent Hill fan. I have not played
Same.
Silent Hill 4, even though I did grow up having the game. I had so many PS2 games, I never got around to it.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's something that I heard. That's something that I remember that a lot of people were telling me. Like, yeah, he shows up in the room in the fourth game. So that's definitely something that they took out. But I'm trying to think of any other place where it's comparable, where Silent Hill took out some stuff and RE4. And right now I am kind of leaning towards that. RE4 did take out more rooms. Yeah. Like
Mm.
especially like you said, like the dragon room, right? The lava room. That room was that room was unnecessary. That was a
Yeah.
fine omission. That was
Well, they
crazy,
they
but
also
kind of cool.
because the Silent Hill 2 thing, I don't remember that. Now I do remember that voice that would say like ritual or something like that in a very deep
Yeah, yeah,
voice.
that thing, that
Yeah.
thing.
No, 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 no,
Yeah,
that isn't the remake.
it is.
Yeah, yeah, the
Oh
voice
shoot.
is. Yeah.
Oh, I see. So I must have missed that then. Yeah, because
Mhm,
I remember I heard I and correct me if I'm wrong, because I only played it once, but I remember like there was something walking on the prison, like it kept going back and forth, and then it would say, like you said, ritual or something. It would do
mhm,
something like that, right?
mhm.
Where did that play in the remake, or was that like an Easter egg?
Like I said, even in the original, I don't remember seeing or hearing anything walk, but I do remember the ritual voice, and I remember in the remake they kept it too. I can't remember specifically where, but I think it's in a jail cell. Because I think in the original,
Okay.
if you actually aim your gun up, you can shoot it, and you can actually hear it like making like noises.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think. Yeah. Now
That's what I did. Yeah.
in the remake, I don't think you can shoot it, but you do hear that really deep like ritual voice.
I see. Well, then
Yeah.
if that's the case, then yeah, well then yeah, then that's still a very good point that you brought up.
Mhm.
That yeah, they basically took out, RE4 took out a lot more stuff than it did
Yeah. And
with Silent Hill 2.
they did take out the if you there's actually two rooms I think, right? In the original Resident Evil 4 to where you had to shoot these four things up on the ceiling to make the ceiling
Yep.
stop. They took that out. Um
Oh, what do you
one
mean the ceiling
thing
stop? Wait,
like there's like the
wait, wait.
ceiling with spikes on it and it goes down and you have to shoot these four things to make it stop. Does that ring a bell at
Uh,
all?
uh, Kind of, yeah. Or now that I'm thinking about it, like the two areas where you fight the Bella sisters and you have the El Gigante and also the truck, like the Ashley driving that like tractor or whatever, that
Mm.
thing as well. That's another example of things that were omitted. But I'm trying to think of the part that you're thinking. Yeah, the I kind of rings a bell.
Mm. Well,
Kind of. Yeah, I can't pinpoint it.
the
Yeah.
truck thing was kind of kept there in spirit with the crane thing, which even though that was still weird that she could operate a crane, it's a lot more realistic than this weird giant trash looking thing. But I mean, again, yeah, it's still technically cut. I mean, and yeah, because the ceiling, there were two parts in there like that. There's one part whenever because you have Ashley with you, and there's three areas, or no, there's two areas. There's one where you're in that room with the armor guys, and then there's a second part because you have to get the cup for the king and queen puzzle, and then you go into this other room, and then Salazar shows up, and you have to shoot these four like little like lit up things on the ceiling to stop the spikes from coming down on you. And
Oh, okay, okay. I know what you
yeah,
mean. Okay, that room. Yeah, yeah. Where he
yeah,
like laughs and he's like, yeah.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, that room.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear the
Hmm.
spikes coming down. I When you said that, I kind of imagined like there was like an elevator that came down. I
Oh
was
no
like,
no no
where's
no
that?
no
Wait, I'm trying to think.
no.
Yeah, okay, no. Okay, yeah. And then after it has like the guys that are like Moritas Vivid and they're like
Yes.
driving a tractor. Yeah, that's you have to shoot them in the. It's weird. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
okay,
then
yeah.
they kind of
I see what
brought
you mean.
that back in separate ways because it was that big like spinning, yeah, thing that Ada had to run away from in the remake, separate ways at least. So they kind of
Yeah, where
brought
was
that
that
back
specifically? Now that I'm thinking about it, where was that?
in separate ways. That's it's obviously in the castle. I think it's right after you get done with Luis. I
Oh,
think.
yeah, no, I think it's when you meet Leon. You meet Leon, and then they do the knife thing, and then Ada
Yes.
goes off, and then she goes through like this hole, right? And then after it close, and you have to shoot the
Yeah, the
the
little like
the thing that
dongs.
dangles. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
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 I forgot about that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and one thing too I liked about Silent Hill 2 Remake is the bosses were pretty much the exact same. My biggest criticism of RE4 Remake is I don't know, I just the bosses kind of disappointed me. I mean, now Salazar's was actually really good. Salazar's I think was a huge improvement. But if you look at Sadler, for example, Sadler, number one, he's barely even in the game compared to the original.
Yep,
Um, and if I feel
yep.
like that with the remake, they just were like, all right, we're gonna pretty much make the same fights, but we're gonna throw in just a little extra stuff just to try to make it different. Like I didn't need bugs flying around me whenever I'm fighting Sadler. That didn't make it cooler to me. If anything, it made it more annoying, and it kind of took away from Sadler's spotlight, in my opinion. The big
I think
cheese,
I think they just did that for ammo. That's the only reason I could
yeah,
think of. That's it.
yeah,
Like there's no other reason. It's kind of like RE5's U8 boss. They kind of had like little dudes that like were spiky
yeah,
and that would
that's
kind of
true.
fly, and then you just shot to get like the crab. I think it's called U8, right? Is it
Something like the
U13? I think it's U8.
you
Yeah.
ate something like that, yeah. Because then there was like with Mendez. Mendez really disappointed me because in the original game, I think what made it so scary is like you would see him like in like the smoke in the distance, and he had these kind of like weird like reddish glowing eyes, and he made very scary sounds. And then in the remake, you see him perfectly, so that kind of took away from the illusion of like, oh shit, where is he? You know what I mean? Because in the original, like he goes away in the smoke, and you're like, uh oh, where is he at? Um, but then he started throwing like, these big canisters at you in the remake, and they made it more cinematic. And I think that kind of took away from the fear. It wasn't as claustrophobic compared to the original barn fight, with
Yeah.
Mendez. In my opinion, at least, it's not horrible. It's just that they didn't really. I don't know. They just didn't really capture the same feeling. Whereas with Silent Hill 2 remake, um, like the 80 boss fight, I think was way better in this than the original. The twin pyramid head fights, are pretty much the same. Same thing with the Mary/Maria boss fight. Um, and the very first pyramid head fight you have in the apartments, that was overhauled for sure. So I guess that is
I
one
think
thing you can
honestly,
kind of dock it from.
I think all of them were kind of overhauled for Silent Hill 2. I think they did a pretty good job for all of that because,
Yeah, they
for
did.
example, like even like the flesh lips, the daddy, what's it called? What's the
Abstract
official
Daddy.
name of it? Abstract Daddy.
Mhm.
Those ones were so like dumb, like just the square room of it. Like I kept dying
Yep.
like the first time, and my viewers were like, "No, do the other, like just run around it." And I'm like, "I'm trying to, but like this thing is so like there's no room to fight anything." And
I
then after
remember
one
watching that,
viewer
yeah.
did like the corner strat, and I was like, "What is
Mm,
okay? I'll do the corner strat. I don't think it's gonna help me, but no, it did actually." And I'm like, "Bro, what?" what? Same thing with the dual pyramid fight as well, right?
mhm,
That was claustrophobic. But then after I got a hang of it, at the hang of it, I had to turn the camera while also running and turning, and then shooting, and then it worked. But
mhm,
for the OG, I mean, but yeah, so I think all of them were just overhauled. I think it just did they did a better job at doing everything.
mhm.
Well, I guess your point, your initial claim here is that RE4's bosses, the remake, were all worse. But I mean, when you mention Vitorres Mendez's fight, you mentioned how it just made you like that. I honestly, I kind of felt like the Vitorres Mendez fight was always very short. Like it was always just a very quick
It
barn fight. I
was.
think the remake did something different where they added him chasing you, and after you get out of the or I'm trying to think, is it after you get out of his house? Yeah, and then you have to
Uh,
go
it's right
or is that
after
separate
the
ways?
no, that's separate ways. You're talking about after
Yeah.
the cabin fight. A little bit after the cabin fight,
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, because it's
Yeah.
actually where in the
You're running
original
with
game.
Ashley.
Yeah, because in the original game you had the two choices, either the El Gigante area or the Bella Sister area. The Bella Sister area they obviously kept, but like how you mentioned, the optional El Gigante fight they scrapped. And
Yeah.
that again is where it
Yeah.
gets kind of weird with boss fights because I mean, again, look at Salazar. He was completely reworked, but in a good way, in my opinion. Um and Silent Hill, like how you said, yeah, they reworked a lot of it, but in amazing ways. I mean, especially the abstract, daddy fight. That one made you feel like you were actually in like an abusive household. The original, you're in just this weird, tiny little square room. Um,
Yeah.
but it's like I said, that's where it gets kind of weird because I guess at that point you got to really think: is it like should I dock points because it's not the exact same thing as before, or should I be okay with it because it's still a remake and it's redone? I personally think the latter. I don't really think it's fair to dock points for boss fights because just like the gameplay and the area itself, of course, is going to be different. It's a remake. Just like, and I mean, again, if
I think
somebody was to use the gold standard of RE1 remake, I don't really think that's fair because um number one, that game's older. So it's not like you're gonna have a tyrant fight at the end of the game that's gonna be way different. Yes, that's an amazing
yeah,
remake, but it's still
it was only a few years,
yeah,
a
exactly,
few years ago.
exactly. So even though that RE1 remake is great, and I bring it up a lot because again, everybody always goes back to that as like, okay, this is what you consider a good remake. Um, it's still a product of its time, though, you know. So,
Yeah,
boss fights, I think, are just like just due to the nature of it being a remake. I don't really think there's anything you can quite take away from that, unless it's something like how I mentioned with the U3 boss fight, to
yeah,
where
that's
they
what I was gonna say.
change
Yeah,
the landscape and the entire identity of the fight. Abstract Daddy, you know, they still kept it claustrophobic, but in a more open way. You know,
yeah,
they
with the
kept the
running
theme.
trolls.
Right, exactly. Um the thing is that they kept
And
the
then they
theme
kept the
there.
same room as well, but just bigger.
Yeah,
Like the
exactly.
Silent Hill 4 kind of like gear room or whatever. They kind of kept
Mhm.
the same feeling. They just added more to it. But I think that's a
Yeah,
good point. I think the only one I think for RE4 where I'll kind of give you credit is probably U3, but I don't know if that's so much of a difference. I think everything else. You also mentioned Sadler, but I don't think that was that. I think that was more of a nitpick. You mentioned about how
it
the
was. It's more of
resellers
a nitpick.
were around,
Yeah.
right? It's not enough to be like, oh, this is not, you know what I mean? Like they did change the overall layout of like the because the in the OG it was just like two like there was like a little thing and then just two walkways that would go up, right? Or no,
Yep.
two walkways and they had two bridges that would go up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they kind of changed that where it's just like a circle, but yeah, all in all, I think that's the only. I will say, I guess to add to your point is Separate Ways didn't add Krauser,
That is true.
but Krauser was kind of lazily placed in the OG Separate Ways.
Yeah.
And another area that they completely took out was the boat area, right? As well, I forgot to mention that too. They did take out
That
the
is
whole
true.
boat area,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, they did.
But the Krauser thing, like the Krauser was kind of lazily placed. The reason I say that is because if you hear Krauser, he just says the same voice line as what he did in the Leon fight. Like he has the same look to him, exact thing, and that's probably most likely due to the fact that Rupert Wazer was worked on later after it got released to PS2, even though it was supposed to be like a Nintendo exclusive GameCube.
Mhm.
So I think they just reused lines. But that's what I mean. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen that. But I think those are the only ones on top of my head that I think that I'm kind of leaning towards. I think like they messed like those are the only ones where I thought they could have done better. U3 and maybe the Krauser fight and Separate Ways OG. Yeah.
Well, to be fair
But
though,
yeah.
the Krauser thing, even whenever I was a kid, I was like, this don't make any sense. Leon already took care of Krauser. Why is Ada taking care of him?
Yeah,
And
that's what I
I
mean.
think
Lazily play. Yeah.
yeah, but I
Yeah.
think the reason though too why they changed it is not only because again it just doesn't make any sense, but also because in the remake, Krauser doesn't really seem like he's working with Wesker in the remake. It's kind
Yep,
of
they
up in the
changed that.
air.
Yeah, they brought that
Uh,
in.
yeah, and not only that, but I mean the dynamic they had between Krauser and Leon was played into a lot more. So obviously they really wanted to hammer home that no, Leon is the one who actually kills him, and rightfully so. If anybody's going to kill Krauser, it should be Leon. And they even played on that, you know, whenever Leon took his knife and kind of looked at himself in the reflection the same way that Krauser did. It was kind of like a like a self reflection moment. You know, it was a narrative
Yeah,
point basically that they changed.
and also an homage as well for the OG because Leon didn't he grab his knife when the first time you encounter Krauser on the island, and that's when like the quick time
Mm.
event happens, where he kind of just pulls the knife from the ground or whatever. Or was it? Isn't that what he? No, he found a knife on the ground. He pulled it, and then he looks at the reflection, and that's when you have to do the. That's when Krauser jumps down and he's like, "What's up, comrade?" Or
Yeah,
whatever. You know, that's when he shows
yeah,
up.
yeah.
So I think, yeah, that's just like a also an homage. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's about it in my opinion. I don't know. It's they did change that, but that's always something that I theorize. They could change it. Like, what if Krauser was working for Wesker? It still could happen. And this is something that I kind of brought up in a theory if they ever made like a Wesker report for DLC, but they never did. So it
Yeah.
seems like yeah, there's no evidence for that. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Which just as a kind of a little side note, but I still do think that we will see more of that at some point, because they do allude to Operation Javier a lot. Um, and I made a video on this a while back ago. It was last year for sure. Um, to where the actors who played as Krauser, Mike Kovac, and Albert Wesker, Craig Bernatowski, if I'm pronouncing his last name right, they were asked in the interview, hey, if you guys ever did separate ways, like, would you want to do it? And they both kind of got quiet, and they're like, we can't really talk about that. So that kind of makes me wonder if
Right.
we
Yeah.
are, and if the rumors are right, and even rumors aside, just logically, if we do get a Code Veronica remake, I think it would make sense to have Operation Javier DLC there, because the original Operation Javier dealt with the T Veronica virus, if I remember right. So
Yeah.
I
No,
still do
it's
think that
that's
we
something
could
that I
get
brought up.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's something that I brought up in a video as well. Yeah. No, it is the T Veronica virus shows up. That's what infects Krauser. And
Mhm.
also the T virus, right? Just because of the
Yeah.
island, and also that's what's afflicting the people in the jungle, right? In Operation Javier. So yeah,
Right.
it's 1 to 1. Also, being in the South, Pacific, with the same islands being right off the coast of South America, so it would make sense. You could have it like off the coast of, I don't know, Peru, or even higher up, Colombia. You know what I mean? Something like that, where it's just a
Mhm.
jungle island, and you could have Code Veronica be there, and then same assets poured over. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But I mean, just final verdict. I mean, what do you think? I mean, if you were to set your bias aside, I mean, which remake do you think is technically the better remake?
yeah. Okay, so if I put my biases aside, or just trying to, because obviously it's hard.
Mm,
But logically, if I were to break it down, and this is something that I kind of alluded to before, is the replayability factor. What game made me play the game a lot more? And I have to say that's Resident Evil 4, just the
mhm,
replayability aspect of it. I played that game way more times than as opposed to Silent Hill 2. Like, as mentioned, I think I'm close to beating it only 3 times, while RE4 Remake, I got the platinum in literally 3 weeks. Yeah, I always get the platinums in 3 weeks for Resident Evil since the
mhm,
HD remaster came out. So that's just me. I don't know why. It seems like I just it always just takes me that long, and not playing like just like once every day for the 3 weeks, and then I'm done. But yeah, it's just a game that even I can play it right now. You know what I mean? Like it's great. But as mentioned before, with Silent Hill 2, it's not the type of game slash media that you kind of play over and over and over again. And I think if Blooper, was it Bloober,
Uber
if
team.
Bloober were to have added that replayability aspect of taking away the chainsaw and making it so that you get it at the end, or you get the other spray thing that you were mentioning, even though I don't know too much about the sprays, that would have incentivized me to get more. If they had put a
Yeah.
trophy to beat it on hard, if they had put a trophy to beat it on normal, which is what Resident Evil has done, right? So
Mhm,
that just would have made the game, just it would have made me want to beat the game, because over and over again to get all the special bonus, stuff,
yeah.
perks. So yeah, from that logic, I had to give the win to RE4 Remake. But
Mhm.
you'd have to remember, at the end of the day, I do think that both are amazing. I'm not,
Same.
they're very different, and that's why I
Very
think this
different.
video is very interesting, because they're
Mhm.
completely different, right? Like you even mentioned it before that it was horror. Silent Hill is definitely more on the horror side. It's definitely more on the paranormal. You know what I mean? Like supernatural. Like you have, stuff about like post, Earth stuff. You know what I mean? Being stuck in a purgatory.
Mhm.
All of those aspects you don't find in Resident Evil. So it's a very different style of game. But obviously, since both are survival horror games, that's what I'm kind of basing it off of. And
Yeah.
replayability is a major aspect for me. I think if they had nailed it, it would have been a 10 out of 10 experience in my
For
review as
sure.
well for the game. But
For
it's
sure.
got really close. Got really close. Yeah.
And one thing too, and I meant to kind of touch on this earlier, but it's actually a good time for me to bring it up right now too. Is back in the day, I think that because Resident Evil games, they've always been very replayable. Sorry, I can't speak tonight. Even the original games were, you play it and you beat in this amount of time, you get a machine gun or a rocket launcher or whatever. Um, I think that what Konami tried to do with the original Silent Hill 2 is all the endings. That kind of is what warranted you to replay. But now with the remake, I think that even though obviously I'm glad they kept the endings, obviously, I don't really think that that translates well over time because now today's day and age, well, there's tricks, like how a lot of people have done the tricks with the two remake. You can save the game a little bit before the end of it, and you can technically unlock like three or four endings just by reloading your save. So I think that's kind of what Konami may have tried to do. If I was in charge, I think what would have been perfect, and this is why I'm hoping that we make it a Born from a Wish DLC, is you could add the replayability there. For example, you could replay it, and let's say that if you beat on the hardest difficulty, maybe you can unlock James's original jacket. Maybe that will give you, maybe that could be the cat ears for this game of you getting infinite ammo. Um, you
or
know,
original music.
right? Yeah, yeah. I mean, even though the
Yeah,
the music in this game is pretty much the exact same with little mixes, you could do that.
yeah,
You
yeah,
could, and we get all these filters too. Why didn't you make those filters unlockable? I mean, it's cool that you can change them at any time, but there's like a CRTV filter or red filter,
yeah.
and it was
That should
cool.
have been unlockable. That's a very good point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we got DLC stuff if you pre-ordered it digital, on the digital market for the
never used it.
yeah, I was gonna say I use the pizza man, the pizza pyramid head,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I
yeah,
felt like, and even though I was happy to pre-order the game, I'm a physical collector, so I didn't like having to do it on digital first of all, and secondly, I
yeah.
kind of felt like that was a weak incentive for somebody to pre-order it. I felt like that this should have been an unlockable thing. A pre-order I felt like should have, and maybe because Konami is just now getting, on their feet again with Silent Hill. But I was wanting like a collector's box, man. Give me a James statue, copy Capcom, show them who's boss if you really want to, give us a really good collector's
Copy them
box.
more. Yeah,
Exactly. But instead we got three masks that easily could have been unlockables. What I'm
yeah.
saying is that, there is content here, but it doesn't feel the same because it's not you don't feel any reward for it. Imagine if you well actually this isn't even imagination. I played Resident Evil 2 remake on the Switch. You can play on the cloud. Unfortunately, it's only cloud.
Yeah.
But you already have like some costumes unlocked at the very beginning. And that felt weird to me. I'm like, well, I don't like that. I remember the original
Yeah.
Resident Evil 2 remake, you had to go unlock your weapons. You had to unlock these outfits, but you're given that.
To go get rid of Brad, right?
Right.
Unlock
And it and
the special key. Yeah.
it just doesn't feel the same. Um and with Silent Hill 2, I feel like that they could have made it a lot more replayable. Um
Yeah.
but it's also
I guess
hard.
that's good advice for the next
Yeah.
one.
But
Yeah.
see, it's also hard though too, because how different they are. Because it's not gonna feel right if you give James a machine gun. Resident Evil,
Yeah.
Resident Evil, it feels a lot more normal to have a rocket launcher or a machine gun. So with Silent Hill, you got to think, okay, then what can we give these characters that's not going to make it too action oriented? Like I said, I suggest giving them their original outfits, but give it a perk. If you wear James's jacket, maybe you get infinite ammo, or maybe you can run a little faster. Something. Um,
Well, I don't know. I mean, like even the OG was kind of it wasn't too realistic. But like I mentioned before, like with the sword, right? You just care like
oh
how
yeah,
did James put that in his pocket? You know what I mean?
oh
Stuff like
yeah.
that, or what else? The chainsaw. You know, even both OG and a remake, it's super. You know, like okay, you know what I mean? Like it's what is this Texas Chainsaw or but but yeah, no, that yeah, it's yeah, they could definitely still add it. They could definitely just add a sword DLC. You know what I mean? Here's the sword.
Yeah.
Like I don't think people Silent Hill fans would be like, "Oh no, that's disgusting." Right? No, that'd be pretty awesome.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it, and also it is pretty wacky. Like even with like that's another thing I wanted to mention is that they did add two new endings, right? But even like having like the Shiba Inu mask and stuff. It's always been kind of goofy with like the alien endings, or the
Yeah. Yeah.
the dog ending. You know what I mean? Like it's never taken itself way too serious, even though that is the main story. It's a very serious game,
Mhm.
but they're always open to having fun. So yeah, that would have been great if yeah, a Bloober did that. Yeah,
Yeah.
had more fun with it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
That would have been
And
the
you
cherry on
know,
top.
yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you could add maybe you can add more weapons in there. Maybe like, well, good example. Unlock Eddie's revolver. You could have done that.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
that's what I'm saying, now you can't go over the top because then it's not gonna fit. Like I said, you can't give James a rocket launcher. That just doesn't fit Silent Hill. But you can still give him, like I said, Eddie's revolver. That would have been man, that would have been dope to have that. Um,
Yeah, beat the game and get like a certain ending and then get Eddie's revolver, beat this,
yeah.
like that's what it's missing. And so I
Mhm.
guess yeah, going back to what, what's which one do you prefer? I guess yeah, which are you also team RE as well, logically?
Well, and you
Or
made a lot of really good points about, breaking it down to which one you're gonna go back and play more. Now, I've played the remake of Silent Hill 2, probably about 5 or so times because I'm simply trying to platinum the game.
yeah,
But
that
after it's
yeah, I agree.
done, I guess it kinda depends on the mood I'm in. Do I wanna sit back and just have fun, turn my brain off, or do I actually want something narrative driven? Something that I'm going to sit back and just admire? It would be Silent Hill 2 remake. For fun, Resident Evil 4 remake all day. But whenever it comes to keeping true to the original, and I mean every tiny little detail, I do think that Silent Hill 2 wins simply because of the spirit of it. What I mean by the spirit of it is, it keeps the same depressing, scary soul to it. The thing about RE4 Remake, and this is one thing that I actually remember, there's a video that a lot of people pass around for a while talking about how the remake was soulless. And I caught offense
I
to
never
that. I'm like,
watched it. I heard
yeah,
about it, but never
well,
watched it. Yeah.
I skimmed through it, but even just the idea of it, I'm like, no, that just doesn't sound right. But as time has went on, I went back and I played the original four again. Yes, I do love four remake, but man, it doesn't have the same feel. I miss the quirkiness. Yes, it's more realistic, and that's cool. I love that, but I miss the cheesy one-liners all the time. Now we did get some in the remake, obviously the bingo line. But I miss, the shit talk between Sadler and Leon. um, there's just some things there to where they went in a different direction, which is fine. I like the more realistic, grounded approach, but I also miss the cheesy, quirky, fun side to it, to where you're like, man, this is so dumb in the best way possible, um,
No thanks, bro.
Exactly. So yeah, I miss that. I
Yeah.
miss that. Again, there's some things they can't keep, the ballistics line, but uh, you know, narrative wise, I do like how this Leon is more depressed. He has more trauma. I like how they actually encapsulated that.
Oh.
Um, but I
Which they
will
kind of
say,
alluded to in RE what's it called? Not Death Island, the one previous to that, Infinite Darkness. They kind of
yeah,
alluded to Leon having that for the very first time.
yeah,
And
his
I
drinking
was
problem.
very I was very interesting. No, 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 that's Vendetta. Vendetta did that, but that wasn't because of Raccoon. That was because of him losing all his men in the
Yeah, yeah,
future.
he's
But
losing his
for
team.
2014
Yeah,
or
that's right.
2013.
That's right.
But Infinite Darkness was about like it was in regards to Raccoon City and him being like, there's so many people that I could have saved,
Yeah.
and then the year later, that's when we got RE4, and they played the same kind of new aspect to Leon, which was very nice. But
Mm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but that's pretty much my final verdict. I mean, I think that technically Silent Hill 2 was a little bit more faithful just by a hair, not by much, just by a little bit. I do think it encapsulated the feeling a lot better compared to the original. But again, even with that aside, I'm still going to go to Resident Evil 4 Remake as far as the better game just because of everything we mentioned, replayability, the fun factor. But as far as a
Yeah,
remake
but
goes, I gotta go Silent Hill 2.
I was gonna ask too. You before you were mentioning that soulless video. which everybody has hated, right? I mean, I've never watched it.
Mhm,
Only heard about it through my viewers when it released and how people were clowning on this guy. I don't know.
mhm,
That's all I heard. It was just like that kind of drama.
mhm.
But is you don't agree that it's soulless, right?
Well, I don't agree that RE4 Remake is
Or just you're
soulless.
just it's different.
It's yeah, it has a different soul to it. It's not soulless, it just has a different identity. You know, the original
Yeah,
was a more fun, quirky, cheesy action movie. This is more of a grounded, PTSD driven Leon, with a more horror
yeah,
theme to it. And that's not a bad thing by any means. It's just they have two different moods. I mean, the best way I can describe it is that, you know, some days you wake up in a good mood, some days you wake up in a bad mood. You're still the same person though. That's kind of how I feel with Resident Evil 4. They're the same game, you know, the same person. They just have two different moods to it, basically. Neither are bad. They're just different.
yeah. Okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's about all I have to say though. Do you have anything else left before we close out?
No, that's about everything. I'm just interested. There was a news post about like an hour and a half ago about Silent Hill F, the Japanese Silent Hill, right?
Hmm.
They're going to be releasing new information on March 13th, so that's something to look forward
Interesting.
to. Right in the interim of us waiting for new new Resident Evil news, right? But yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. I look forward to that then. That's yeah, it's good to leave off of. I didn't know that. So yeah, I'll be looking forward to that then.
that's brand new news, right?
Yeah, yeah,
As you were
finally.
talking, yeah,
Bardo, man, I thank you for coming on. It's been a very interesting chat. And anybody who's
yeah.
watching
Thank
this,
you
if
for
you
having
haven't
me.
already, go check out Project Wesker's channel. The link will be in the description below. Uh, he does a lot more than I do, definitely streaming and everything. So yeah, go check him out for sure if you haven't already.
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks. Thank you for having me.
yeah, for sure. All right, well, I'll catch you next time, bud.